One take one, and we're back with a weekend roundup here in May, towards mid May. We've had double digit, well, better than double digit. It's been like 20 degrees and sunny, and a bit of a mini summer run here. That being said, I'm inside. To do this wrap up, I wanted to catch up on some wines that we've had over the weekend. So all of the wines today have been opened at least a day. In one case, 2 days. There's one bottle that I don't have here. I didn't have any left, and I don't even have the empty bottle. But a friend brought over a bottle of the 79 Chateau Palmer, which had a very musky fruit cellar, barnyard, almost, cloying, dirty smell. That was off-putting a bit at first, and a tiny tinge of metallic at first as well. So you're starting to think, all right, this is just going to break down and get old. First of all, 79 is not the top vintage, is it? But it is a Chateau Palmer. Chateau Palmer had fantastic vintages in the 70s and 80s. That's the real heyday of that wine, although they're still making fantastic wines today. It's not that. It's just, I like drinking old Palmers. I think you can be surprised. It's like drinking old La Mission, Aubrions in a way, because they hardly ever let you down. They really made solid, good wines, even in bad vintages. Anyway, so the 79, after a couple hours, it grew very pruny. Fruit obviously was breaking, and it's maybe looking its age around the edges with that breaking, but still a very deep, dark color to it. Quite youthful, really. If you ignored the nose, that kind of funkiness, that mustiness, that was hovering over it for a little while, then you'd think it was a fairly young wine, 90s. So 79, well done. Really enjoyed it. One of the things I really liked it. It was very black, truffly, and a little bit of tea, and had a lot of prune, sort of caramelly notes to it, malty sort of feel to it. But it had this magnificent structure. It was. Yeah, the fruit was still very fresh and not broken down at all, really. And right towards the finish, instead of the typical trajectory of your wine sort of taking you through a lovely mid-palate and then gracefully, going into the night, this one takes you through the mid-palate, and as it gets to the end, it shifts into another gear and goes whoomp, and it takes like a big step up in terms of the finish. It's a finish with flourish. Really, really interesting. I wish there was some sort of magic formula for how those wines could get made, and we could add it to every single wine, because it's really it's neat, for lack of a better word. It's very cool. I love the effect. I love that it goes out with a bang like that. That it says, I'm not done with you yet. I have more to give. That wine was very good. I went so high as 95 points. I may have been in a very forgiving mood, but it's just I was so impressed with its overall performance. Great, but what do we have in the glass today? Well, this is the first wine we're going to talk about. This one's been open 2 days. I opened it Friday, and it's very dark cherry on the nose and a little menthol almost, herbal, and then a coolness to it. Reminds me of not tobacco, but some kind of herb, if you catch my drift. It's quite a complex herbal, and it isn't a sweet wine. It's not like the fruit is a sweet cherry. It's a black musky cherry. Nice mouthfeel. Feels young. It feels like it should be in the cellar for a little longer. It's the Faiveley Romanée 2016. And, first of all, 2016 with Faiveley. Always liked them. Anyway, the Joli Chambertin Vieille Vigne was an eye-opener for me in terms of Faiveley. this is not the Gevrey Chambertin. Obviously, it's a Vosne Romanée, but I'm in the sense of which wine would I probably buy cases of. I would probably still go with the Gevrey. However, this is a really nice Vosne Romanée. It is. It doesn't have any hard edges. It's soft and musky and very almost. I mean, it doesn't have a ton of length. It's a little bit flat towards the finish, but it doesn't just drop off suddenly and disappear on you. It still persistently sort of tingles along for a little bit. And the fruit sits okay. I mean, it doesn't have the drive, obviously it's not a Grand Cru, it's a Village. Yeah, there's that label again. Really, really good. I mean, I'd never tried the Village Romanée. Faiveley keeps impressing me at every turn, and 2016 in particular. I really enjoyed that vintage. Yeah, that's just, that's a very complex nose. And on the nose, it's promises more than you could say it delivers on the palate, even though the palate is very good. It's a Burgundy for wine lovers. I don't think it's the one you bring to a party and hope to impress everybody with, because that's not what it's going to be. It's a little bit more complex than that. Has an interesting mouthfeel and flavor profile. I mean, that cherry and muskiness maybe is not so strange, but combined with that herb complexity, that herb melange to it. Yeah, because I'm not going. Yeah, I guess you could go a little bit Asian spicy even with it if you wanted to, and maybe that's what I'm detecting and I'm interpreting wrong. It has been a weekend. That's a rebuy at the right price for sure. I'd definitely go again. Second bottle we're gonna do is another bottle that we opened yesterday, that was brought here yesterday by my guest. And look at the color of that. Holy wow. It's getting very, very, it's starting to break in the sense of looking old. There's a lot of sediment kind of going on too. We're at the end of the bottle. On the nose, it's very, there's the cellar. That's a cellar nose, but also a very, still lots of fruit poking through, root vegetables and fruit. And now that I know what it is, we drank them blind, so we were trying to guess what they were. And I mean, I knew it's a Burgundy, but I was in the north, and it's a south wine. What do we got in the glass here? Let's check it out. Yeah. What a completely different wine from the previous. First of all, it's got some age. Second of all, it still has a lot of energy despite its age. So there's a very, very, it's almost like an orange and wild strawberry mix to me in the fruit department. And then there's a very tannic carpet at the end. Maybe in the last third of the wine, the tannin picks up and sort of carpets the way to the finish, you could say. The fruit doesn't overwhelm the fruit or anything. It's just the style of the wine and where it comes from. This has got so much tea in it that you might understandably go New World even, except for the structure. Yeah, I think we're in France all the way. I think it's a very classic Burgundian type profile. It has a lovely earthiness to it as well. It's a good wine, good solid wine. What do we got? It is the 2005 Corton Clos de Roi from La Pousse d'Or. La Pousse d'Or, funny, these things seem to come in clusters, don't they? I mean, didn't I do a Le Cailleret Puligny Montrachet not so long ago from Pousse d'Or, 2008. This is the 2005 Corton Clos de Roi, so it's a Grand Cru. it's a Grand Cru from the south. It is a Corton type Grand Cru, so you make allowances for that. I think you have to. But these are lovely wines, and they're often at a great price point, compared to the rest of Burgundy. And I think the value in 2005, going back to that vintage, was the most talked about vintage of the Nols, of the 00s. The 2000s, maybe most talked about, but the most celebrated, you could say, up until about 2009. In Burgundy for sure. There was 02 maybe, got a little bit of traction. 03 for the heat wave, and then 05 for this. They made such a big deal about the quality, and I was never convinced because of that tannic actually structure. I think 05s can be a little generous on the tannin side, and where's that label again? Just yeah, it's great wine without being overwhelmingly knock your socks off, stop everything type of wine. It's a solid glass of good Burgundy, in the 93 to 94 point range. I think is where you'd be sitting, because it's still a very fine wine. You shouldn't feel bad if you have some in the cellar, and especially if you have their other cuvée, that's 60 degrés. That's for my money, it's a little more delicate and a little more precise and a little more Burgundy, all in all, you could say. This was very good. Give me a second and we'll move on to the third one. No peeking. I guess I could have stopped the film, but it is one take wine, so you can fast forward, right? Fast forward, a little button on your machine. Let her rip. All right, so for this third wine, this was another one we opened for the barbecue yesterday. It was a lovely time. We had so many great wines, out in the back. Weather was beautiful. Lots of roasted carnivore type products. What do we got in the glass? Ooh, baby. Here was an interesting wine, and on the nose right away. I because we had this. We were doing, like I said, we were doing it blind, and the guessing was sort of it was a Burgundy, very Burgundy nose, very Burgundian, and I totally get that. It has a fresh red fruit note to it, and a bit of the cellar sort of peeking through, so it has some age. You can see around the edges, maybe a little bit of color, but not overly so. Yeah, and then you get it in the mouth, and it's got this, it's got an amazing energy to it. It has a real drive and a freshness to it, with some push, like some drive, some real. And I still think the fruit is more strawberry than anything, even though I know what it is, and probably think it should be something else. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Maybe a little coffee to it. I would have went Grand Cru Burgundy with this, but it's nowhere near there. Well, nowhere near, but you know what I mean. It's a Rotie La Belle Hélène from Ogier, in the celebrated 1999 vintage. Celebrated because Parker at the time gave it 100 points, which he wasn't really giving away a lot of on other than Gigels. The La La Las, that was his joy. That's his game. And this, I've had a lot of Belle over the year, a lot of vintages. I've never had the 99, so yesterday was the first time to have that. And I couldn't believe how high the acidity is in this. I mean, it's a super fresh wine still. It's not 100 points, but it's, golly, if that isn't good. It's so clean. The fruit is so clean and pure and balanced, and there's no edge out of place. It's a very well groomed wine, you could say. You know, like just stepped out of the barber shop, fresh shave, perfectly clipped. Really, really, really nice, and that intensity of nose that is very strawberry. It is. It just is. It is red fruit. There's, yeah, some coffee notes maybe, but even that you could end up in Burgundy, right? I mean, very little to sort of suggest that it's Syrah, and you might knock it down some points for that. I don't personally, because I like this style. I mean, boy, if you can achieve this with Syrah, you know, you're a magician. You did something. I don't know what it was, or maybe it's just the style of the vintage and the style of the you know, how he made the wine in that particular year, and you know what it ended up being. But I'm pouring myself some more. I like this one a lot. This one deserves a second Sunday glass. And you know, it's been open overnight in a carafe. I didn't even put it back in a bottle or in the fridge or anything. It's just holding on and loving life and ready to deliver. I don't have to coax anything out of it. Bottle I bought in Copenhagen some years ago, and I can see the stains on it, and I suspect that it was part of a cellar that was flooded back in the, I don't know, can't remember what year it was, 13, 14, 15, something. And so, you know, I mean, you could wonder how it affected the quality of the wines, but this is very, 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 very good. It would be interesting to have it beside a La La La, which I think would blow it out of the water, because I think in that sense it's a much more powerful wine, right? You know, even a La Turque, even, I think, maybe. But yeah, and then you would definitely, I'm not too sure you'd be, well, maybe Rostaing. We talked about Rostaing style. It could be a little bit closer to that, but I find Rostaing has a lot of violet and darker fruit to it. So no, this is a unique wine even for La Belle Hélène, which is usually a dark, for me, it's a very dark fruit wine, you know. And also bacony a little bit more, and, you know, a little more typical Cote Rotie. There's no bacon here. There's no olives. There's no, you know, some of the signs that you would look for, even asphalt or but, you know, some of those telltale giveaways that you would know where you are, and so in that sense, it's a great wine to bring to a tasting blind, I must say. And finally, last but definitely not least, I opened a bottle of sherry. This is like sticking a salt pack in your nose, salt and nuts. Obviously, it's a sherry. Ooh, baby. Oh, that's powerful. Almost a citrus lemon cut to it in the top note. The salt is, I mean, it drips with salt all the way through, and an almost caramel sort of next layer below that citrus layer, and then very nutty. Very hazelnutty and yeah, maybe roasted hazelnuts actually. And super power. I mean, it's very powerful. It's a little brash actually. It's a little more almost youthful, although it's not youthful. It's very old. So what do we got in the glass here? Well, this time it's the San Roberto Amontillado from Barbadillo. And I made a note some time ago. I don't think it's being posted. I think it's in the archives, but because it came in a set of 3, right? there was an Amontillado 1 of 2. This is 1 of 2. There was a 2 of 2 Amontillado, and then there was a Palo Cortado, all from the same release. And the release was, as far as I understand, from Barbadillo. They were some barrels that had been sort of isolated in the warehouse and had just been sort of sitting there undisturbed on their own. People had forgotten about them. They hadn't really been part of the system. And then, the decision was taken, should we add them to the Soleras, because they make a very good 30-year-old or VORS. Really good Palo Cortado. And so, no, they did a single release. There's going to be no other release of this because there was only these barrels, and there are no more barrels of this wine, and there will be no more barrels of this wine. So they did a one-off and sold them off to Systema. And this one got 100 points from Parker. Or was it the Palo Cortado? No, this one got 100 points from Parker, that's right. The Palo Cortado, I think it was the Palo Cortado, got a huge amount of points from Jancis Robinson. And then the other one was like 98. You know what I mean? They were 100, 198 type of... Yeah, anyway, they were all super high-scoring wines. Obviously, people really... The critics kind of enjoyed them. And I totally get it. I love that. I love the energy and the freshness of that citrus, but the salty. This very much screams, like this is the barrel that was closest to the ocean, you could say. If all sherries were like this, that's all you'd drink. That said, I find this one a little bit frayed, a little bit like high strung, a bit more energetic and not quite as seductive as the 2 of 2 was. The 2 of 2 I gave, that for me was a Grand Vin. The Palo Cortado I gave somewhat less. I didn't think it was anywhere near up to the Amontilledo's level, the first bottle, the 2 of 2. And then the 1 of 2 here, I think sits somewhere in between those two. In my, in my book. It's going to change for everybody. Because it's a little brasher, it's a little bit more of the cymbal, the crash type of the party, more so than the others. The Palo being calmer and more caramel, I would say, and more. It did have they all had a little bit of youthful exuberance to them, without being youthful, like that kind of frayed, energetic side, but the other two sort of incorporated it a little bit more, from what I remember. I'm sure my notes don't reflect that, but yeah, this is very, very good. Highly recommend it if you ever saw them, but I doubt it. I'm not sure you'll ever see them. Just because of I don't know how many bottles were, 1,000 or something. Maybe. Who knows? Wasn't very many, and there won't be any more. That's it for this week. What a great week it's been, as you can see. Life is good sometimes. We've got a lot more coming up in the weeks ahead. I hope you'll stick with it. I hope you enjoy these sometimes longer missives. I am going to make an attempt to make shorter ones. And then we'll see what happens. All right. Until then, stay super thirsty, and we'll see you next time.